them. They've been great. Amelia, I pass stuff through her and she passes it on. You know, when the Founding Fathers created our House of Representatives, it was supposed to be someone who would be close to the people. And that's exactly what the congressman has been doing. When we decided to take on these CART, we created War on CART, he was the first one in. He came here with an official hearing, and this place was filled up, 400 people on a beautiful sunny day on a Friday in what, June or July, which showed a whole lot of, that really got the ball rolling. And I appreciate you doing that. He's been there with us on things that we've done over the Forest Service, and all kinds of little things that you never hear about that I have questions or issues with, and I go straight to him, and he's able to help us with it. So you're doing a fantastic job. You really are. Proud that you're my congressman, and
yes, sir.
I guess I'll let you come up here and speak. Congressman Comer.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much, Wade. I want to thank the Chamber for inviting me here today. Thank the sponsors for sponsoring and all the great community people who are here. This is a great area, great community, because everyone works together, and I just appreciate that working relationship. I appreciate the opportunity you've given me to serve as your voice in Washington, and I look forward to working with you as we move forward. I appreciate Wade White. You know, Wade is he's got to be one of the most effective county judges in the state. If you've never had Wade White pursue you about a mission that he feels passionate about, then you haven't experienced true living yet. Wade is very persistent. He sets goals and he works to achieve them. We need more people like you in Washington, Wade. That's people set goals and then they never pursue, they never try to achieve them or govern, as I say. But I appreciate your leadership here, and the mayors appreciate you all for being here. I told the mayor of Catawba that I spent last night at the Hampton Inn and walked over to the Oasis. So I've done my part for the economy in Catawba over the last little bit. I appreciate my friend Chris Freeland here, the state rep. He's doing a great job in Frankfort. You have a great representative. Appreciate him. And I have to brag on Reagan. My oldest daughter's named Reagan. So you have a beautiful voice. Appreciate you coming here on your day off to entertain us and you have you have just a beautiful voice. As was mentioned, I just returned from the Virgin Islands. The Virgin Islands are part of the United States, you know, so I'll throw that in there. But just to give you an example, I was telling Judge Cunningham how partisan Washington has gotten, unfortunately, and how divisive it is. The Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and Guam, the Marshall Islands, Washington, D.C., they have delegates to Congress. There are 435 members of Congress. I'm one of 435. Kentucky has 6. Then the territories each have a delegate. So the territories are part of the United States. Puerto Rico's been in the news a lot, obviously, because they've had a lot of hurricane damage there to the island. But the delegate from the Virgin Islands is on the Agriculture Committee. And the farmers, and there are about 350 farmers in the Virgin Islands, they are in a crisis because the last appropriation in Congress to help farmers affected by the hurricane in the islands, it all went to Puerto Rico, and nothing went there. Their infrastructure's kind of been damaged, and they have some issues. So she wanted to have a field hearing, like the one we had here that Wade was talking about, to start the discussion on the Asian carp. She wanted to have a field hearing in the Virgin Islands, which is her district, obviously. So she invited the chairman of the committee, who is Colin Peterson, a good friend of mine. He's the Democrat chairman from Minnesota. Well, he was afraid to go. We wanted to help her, but he was afraid if I go to the Virgin Islands, they're going to attack him. We're going to the Virgin Islands. They're going to have a TV ad with him, with some actor laying on the beach, drinking a strawberry daiquiri or whatever. So he said, we gotta have a Republican go, and then maybe they won't attack. So they asked for volunteers on the agriculture committee, and I thought, well, I've never been. I was kind of thinking about that, sitting on the beach with the daiquiri and all that, but that wasn't what it ended up being. We were in boots and jeans and met with the farmers, and they have problems just like everyone else, and hopefully we'll be able to help them. But that's how I spent 2 days in the Virgin Islands. It was a quick trip. We flew from Washington to St. Croix, and then yesterday came back from St. Croix to Nashville, and ended up in Catawba, and here we are today. So that was my Virgin Islands experience, but it was born out of the fear that a member of Congress who's genuinely, sincerely trying to do something good would have it backfire on them, and that's kind of the minefield that you have to walk through, unfortunately, today in politics in Washington. The good things can happen in Washington, though, and I use the example of what Wade just mentioned. We had the field hearing here to begin the discussion about the Asian carp crisis. And Wade is, as I said, very persistent. And I know many of you helped get a crowd here, but it's very hard to get a crowd. I mean, unless you're Donald Trump, it's very hard to get a crowd. You see these people running for president, they're working hard, they're trying, they're doing the best, and nobody's showing up, But we had a field hearing here, that's code word for boring. Field hearing, very boring. Congressman, very boring, all that. Had one here to discuss Asian carp, which isn't the kind of thing that Fox News or CNN would want to cover, Asian carp. Had over 400 people here. 400 people here. We had a very productive discussion. Many of you were there. And the sheer number of people who showed up, the press, all the local press covered it. It really got the attention of Senator McConnell, which is very important, because Senator McConnell is in charge of the appropriations process in Washington. It takes money to fix things. If you talk about infrastructure, we have crumbling infrastructure in America. It takes money to build roads and bridges and locks and dams and things like that. It takes money to fix many of the problems that we have, unfortunately. So this got McConnell's interest going. Wade continued, many of you continued with him, and we're to the point to where, as we go out on the water today, Senator McConnell and I, there's been a lot of money appropriated for this, and it's not just a one-time thing. We won't appropriate money, we check that box, we're moving on. We really want to eradicate the Asian carp, and they tell me that they're starting to see a difference. The fishermen have said they're starting to see the fishing improve. The people that are out on the lake, the recreational people, say they're seeing less fish jump out of the water. It's still a problem. We know there's still a problem, but we're going to evaluate today and see how the different agencies are working together. And that's been a challenge too, to get different government agencies to work together. But hopefully, as time passes, we'll be able to bring good news. But I say that because it started here. It started with the big crowd. It started with the community coming together and trying to come up with a plan to solve the problem. And I just appreciate this community for working together. I also have to recognize my friend Joe Cunningham in Congress. He's become one of my best friends in Congress, and I appreciate his family being here. Joe's he's a rising star on the. I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat. I tell him all the time, Judge, if the rest of his class were more like him, if the squad were more like Joe, it would be a better place in Washington. But he's doing a great job. You all should be very proud to have a Lyon County native in Washington. You can tell he grew up here because he's got common sense and he wants to get along. He wants to govern. He has his ideology, but at the end of the day, you have 435 people in Congress. Everybody represents different areas. Every area and every congressional district is unique. Congressional opinions and ideologies are like fingerprints, no two match. But at the end of the day, you have to come together to govern. And when you have a House of Representatives with a Democrat majority, a U.S. Senate with a Republican majority, and then a president that's Republican, for anything to pass, it has to be somewhat bipartisan. My problem with Washington now is we're passing bills in the House of Representatives that are very far to the left. They're not going to pass the Senate. The Senate's doing the same thing. They're passing bills that are too far to the right. The House isn't going to take it up. So what you have to have moving forward are members of Congress that are sincere. They fight for what they think is best, but at the end of the day, they really want to govern. You have to have people that want to govern. It's not just to show who the most outrageous member is the one that gets on TV that night. Politicians like to be on TV, so they have to say more and more outrageous things to get on TV, and the ones that are really trying to govern don't always get on TV. But Joe's one that sincerely wants to govern. I appreciate working with him in Washington. Look forward to working with him in the future. I wanted to mention a couple of things that we're trying to do in Washington to try to make America better. The impeachment, I was against impeachment from day one. That dominated the press for several months. I'm glad it's over. Hopefully we can move on. I'm sure everyone in here has a different opinion of how that should have turned out, or whether or not that should have happened or not, but it did, and it's over, and it's time to move on. If you ask Americans what their biggest problems are, it doesn't matter who you are, healthcare is going to always be at the top. And this is my third year in Congress. The first year was Trump's first year. Of course, he tried to repeal Obamacare, and that was a very difficult discussion. That took up about a year's time, and at the end of the day, nothing happened. I think everyone was sincere in wanting to fix the healthcare system. It was just impossible to get any type of proposal that had a majority in the House, which we did pass a bill in the House by 2 votes, but then you had to get 60 votes in the Senate, and at the time you had 52 Republicans and 48 Democrats. It's very difficult to get to 60 when everything's a party line vote, and that's kind of what happened with healthcare. So I think everyone on both sides have learned from the mistakes over that, because we have to do something about healthcare. It's not sustainable. You cannot continue to ask people to pay more and more for health insurance, and they receive less and less in the fact that their co-pays continue to increase, the deductibles continue to increase, and the premiums continue to increase. You're paying more for less every year, and it's not sustainable. So what we've tried to do, instead of repeal the whole healthcare system, is look at different pieces. What's a piece of healthcare that we can begin with, a piece or two, to where there can be agreement, and we can move from there. So the 2 pieces that we've identified, prescription drugs and surprise billing. So if you are on any type of drug like insulin, if you're diabetic, I don't need to tell you how much insulin prices have increased over the last 3 or 4 years. Ridiculous. There's really no reason for that. Insulin is pretty much the same insulin that's been around for decades, but you've got a situation to where many of us believe that there's price gouging taking place by certain pharmaceutical companies that sell insulin. So we're trying to identify a few common drugs that many Americans have to take, insulin being one. This district's one of the highest per capita diabetic congressional districts in America. So we're trying to come up with a plan, and you don't want to have socialism. I'm against Medicare for all, because you can't have Medicare for all. The whole system collapses. I support Medicare for everyone. Medicare's for people 65 and over. My father was on Medicare, and he liked Medicare, and I support Medicare, but everyone can't be on Medicare, or then the Medicare for the retirees won't look like the Medicare they have today. I can assure you. But we have to do something about companies that are gouging Americans with common essential drugs. So I think there's progress being made on that. I'm on a couple of committees that have jurisdiction over some of the discussion and some of the rules and some of the policy with respect to prescription drugs. That's one part of healthcare that I'm pretty confident we'll get agreement on now that impeachment's over and we can move forward. The other part is surprise billing. If you've been to the hospital, and I love hospitals. We have 28 hospitals in this congressional district. That's the most of any congressional district that's not an at-large district. Like Montana has one congressman. They have more hospitals than that. The Dakotas each have one. But we have 28 hospitals in this congressional district. So if you look in the communities that have hospitals are one of the biggest employers in each of those 28 counties. So I'm all about protecting the hospital. The little hospital in Salem, we love that hospital. We want that hospital to continue to grow and prosper and serve the needs of the community. But at the end of the day, we've got a problem when people go to the hospital and they don't know how much it's going to be. They don't know if you have health insurance, am I better off giving you my health insurance card knowing that I have a huge deductible and I'm going to have to, or would I be better off paying cash? When you go to the doctor, my father was a dentist. If you go to the doctor, I don't understand why you don't know what it's going to cost. You know, you go to the restaurant, you get a menu. You know, you go to the car lot, the price is on the cars. This is 2020. I feel like there should be a little more transparency in medical billing with hospitals. You go to the hospital and you pay a bill, and then you come home and over time you keep getting more bills in the mail from different people, and you didn't know about that. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we have the technology to where you can have one bill, and there should be transparency when you purchase something in healthcare. It's the only industry in America that I know of where you have no idea what something's going to cost. And I know I get a few doctors or dentists or medical professionals that are probably not happy with what I'm saying, but I think we can come to a consensus here, and it would be better for everyone, because I know that the medical providers have a nightmare dealing with the insurance companies. You know, the insurance companies are a problem, but you have to have insurance companies in healthcare. Everybody has to work together in this. So the medical billing, the transparency in billing, and the prescription drugs, these are two areas where I'm pretty optimistic that we can come together in Congress and get a bipartisan solution. And I'm sure whatever the final bill looks like, and the president's indicated if we can come up with a bill, he'll sign it into law. Whatever that final bill looks like, I'm sure once it is enacted, there'll be a few problems here and there, and it's going to be something that's going to constantly have to be revisited. But the American people have made it loud and clear to every member of Congress that they're unhappy with the current state of healthcare in America. And you know, instead of trying to do a broad-based reform, which Congress tried and failed, maybe the best route moving forward is to go piece by piece and identify areas where we can agree, where Democrats and Republicans do agree, where rural legislators and urban legislators can agree. You know, it's not just Republican and Democrat. You can look at the gun control issue. This is a big issue. It's springing up all over Kentucky. Counties are passing Second Amendment sanctuary bills and things like that. The gun control issue really isn't Republican versus Democrat in Washington. It's rural versus urban. There are a lot of Republicans for gun control in urban areas. There are a lot of Democrats in rural areas that are opposed to gun control. It's just the fact, in my opinion, that in rural areas, I grew up in Monroe County, which is almost identical to Lyon County with no lakes. And you know, we had, every house had a gun or guns. That was for sport. That was to protect the family. It wasn't a bad thing. Guns were a good thing. You go in the suburban and urban areas, and they don't, when they think of guns, they think of crime. They think of people that rob banks and convenience stores and kill people. And it's just a different mentality. So, every issue where there's controversy in Washington isn't just a Republican versus Democrat issue, it's also a rural versus urban. And I don't need to tell anyone in here, there's a huge divide in America between rural versus urban. So that's kind of where the gun control and the Second Amendment issues lie. They're around more rural versus urban. So other issues moving forward that I hope we can get agreement on, I'm less optimistic on, is infrastructure. You know, eventually there'll be an infrastructure bill passed in the United States Congress. I don't know that it will be this year because I don't see a lot of the Democrats in Congress giving the president $2 trillion to spend right before an election. We see that in Kentucky governor's races a lot, you know. They hoard the money. I'm going to quote Robert Stivers. They hoard the money until the very end, and right before the election they start doling it out. I don't think they're going to give this president any money to hoard on infrastructure, but we have an infrastructure crisis in America. One of the areas of infrastructure that's important here that we've been trying, and hopefully we're starting to see a little bit of success in getting dispersed out in this area, is rural broadband. And when I'm traveling in West Kentucky, that's one of the biggest issues, and one of the biggest complaints I hear from residents is, you know, a lack of broadband opportunity. And if we don't have broadband, we're not going to keep the young people in this area. I mean, you have to have broadband for Netflix and things like that. You have to, everything is, as we know, is internet connected. And if you don't have broadband, you're not only are you not going to keep young people in the area, you're not going to attract good paying jobs in areas. So broadband is just like any other infrastructure. I'm for limited government. I think the government spends way too much money, too much waste, fraud, and abuse of government. But there are certain things the government is responsible for, in my opinion. Infrastructure is one of them. It's government's responsibility to protect the people. And that's not just through military and through law enforcement. It's through things like monopolies. And you have to have infrastructure. And it's government's responsibility to build roads and bridges. It's government's responsibility to ensure that we have locks and dams for the inland waterways. And when you look at the infrastructure, the broadband should be treated like electricity. You know, we ensured, this was before I was born, we made sure Congress that every American had access to electricity. So I'm sure at the time electricity was like broadband, companies wanted to provide electricity in areas that had dense populations because it's easy, you know, you get money, they pay bills. But when you go the extra mile out into the rural areas where many of us grew up, it wasn't profitable for the electric companies to deliver electricity out there. So the government had to partner through TVA and different entities to ensure that every American had electricity. That's the way we need to look at broadband for the rural areas. You know, the urban areas, the densely populated areas, it's happening, it's happened, it's going to happen. But in the rural areas, it's going to take a little nudge, a little participation, public-private partnership. So that's something that I'm working on. I wanted to mention today because it's something that's very important. I know cell service is pretty sketchy in certain areas. All the lakes in Kentucky have pockets where they don't have cell service, and that's a problem. And we're trying to work with the wireless companies to ensure that there are no dark spots in America, no blackout areas in America for that as well. So that's all part of infrastructure. I'm more optimistic about infrastructure in 2021 than I am 2020. But I wanted to conclude with the part about health insurance because I believe that that's an area where we can get compromised and an area where Americans of both parties, of every income, financial spectrum of whether they're urban or rural, everybody's wanting some action done and some reforms made with respect to healthcare. I want to do that in a way that doesn't hurt the private sector. I get frustrated at the pharmaceutical companies like everyone else does over what I view as price gouging on certain drugs, but at the same time I understand you have to have the drug companies to come up with research and development to cure things like the coronavirus and things like that. If it were government-run healthcare, there would be no incentive for any drug company to come up with any cure for any type of outbreak. So, you have to walk a thin line there, recognize where there are areas where you can make reforms without hurting technology, without hurting the private sector, essentially. So, if anyone has any concerns about healthcare or any other issues, Asian carp, anything that you feel like I should be doing, or we should be working on in Congress, please feel free to let me know. I love to tell people this. If you have any complaints, Amelia Wilson is in charge of complaints. She is available 24/7. If you have any complaints, see Amelia. But we do want to know what we can do to try to help. I am one of 435. I appreciate the opportunity. It's very challenging. The impeachment was a very challenging process, but at the end of the day, I do think there are areas where we can come together, and I promise I'm going to do everything I can to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So with that, does anybody have a question or two? If not, I'll turn it back over. You're having to listen to this accent. I've got a little laryngitis, so it makes my accent even worse. Is that possible?
I got one, Jamie.
Yes.
You had mentioned about the internet issue, Wi-Fi and that. I have, speaking for my own self, I have been trying to impress upon websites, internet sites like